They told us MK Ultra was the end of it. But that was just the tip of the knife. This ain't fiction. This isn't some conspiracy rabbit hole. This is documented, declassified, and still denied by the people who ran it. What you're about to hear is real. The CIA didn't just run MK Ultra, they ran an entire suite of programs under the MK codename. MK was the tag the CIA used for its most covert and dangerous experiments, all run through the Technical Services Division. That's the Black Ops tech lab of the intelligence world. Mind control, biological weapons, assassination tools, psychological warfare, it was all fair game. Most folks only know about Ultra, that was just the one they let you see. But there was also MK-Naomi, MK-Delta, MK-Artichoke, MK-Often, MK-Chikwit, MK-Search, and what some claim to be MK-Monarch and MK-Echo. Each one had its own target: drugs, death, hypnosis, psychic warfare, trauma programming, even signal-based mind control. You think this is wild? It's already been done. MK Ultra used LSD, electroshock, isolation, hypnosis, and forced drugging on prisoners, soldiers, and civilians. People were dosed with 10, 15, even 20 hits of acid without consent. Some never came back. MK-Naomi, documented in a memo declassified in 2012, was designed to stockpile deadly toxins and build covert biological weapons. The CIA teamed up with the Army Special Operations Division at Fort Detrick to develop poisons that could be delivered silently, via dart, a cigarette, a handkerchief, even a lipstick tube. This wasn't theory. These were operational weapons, and they were designed for targeted kills and plausible deniability. The memo said it clear. Naomi's mission was to provide lethal materials, build covert delivery systems, and test them under operational conditions. And that's just one program. MK-Artichoke focused on hypnotic programming and memory erasure. MK-Delta was about using these tools in foreign countries. MK often studied witches, astrology, and psychic phenomena. MK-Chikwit was a pharmaceutical operation, collecting drugs from overseas and testing them for behavioral control. MK-Search was the quiet continuation of Ultra after the heat got too high. MK-Monarch, if real, was about trauma-based programming, splitting personalities, and creating programmable assets from childhood. And MK-Echo, that's the rumored next step. Signal weapons, microwave harassment, remote neural influence, voice-use tech. You think it's sci-fi, but some say it's already deployed. The truth is, MK was never about one program. It was a blueprint, a full-on psychological weapon system, and just because they don't call it MK anymore, doesn't mean it's not still active. Today they don't need LSD and poison darts. They've got algorithms, they've got your data, they've got your attention. So now we ask, how many MK projects were there, and what's really going on in the programs we're not allowed to see? Welcome to the Hidden War. This is MK Mind. You ever wonder where nightmares get built? The answer is Fort Detrick. Tucked away in Maryland, this Army base was home to the U.S. government's most secretive biological warfare lab. While the public thought we were curing diseases, the CIA and Army Special Operations Division were manufacturing them. Fort Detrick was the factory for MK-Naomi, the CIA's top-secret death lab. This wasn't Hollywood. This was a real location, backed by real documents. Their mission was to weaponize disease and toxins for covert use. Anthrax, botulinum toxin, shellfish poisons, even exotic bioagents no one would recognize in an autopsy. Fort Detrick built them, stored them, and tested them, sometimes on animals, sometimes not. Under the agreement forged in 1952, the CIA and the Army worked hand in glove. The Technical Services Division of the CIA would request a product, say, a fast-acting paralytic or an untraceable poison, and Detrick would deliver. The Army handled the dirty science, the CIA handled the delivery, a dart gun, a cigarette, a contaminated object that would never raise suspicion. The memo I told you about earlier, it confirms all this. It said Naomi would maintain these lethal items in operational readiness, make sure they were defect-free, and keep them stocked for immediate use. Think about that, a whole warehouse of death, ready to go at a moment's notice. This wasn't about winning wars. This was about quiet kills. No noise, no mess, no fingerprints. They weren't targeting soldiers. They were targeting ideas, leaders, whistleblowers, threats to the agenda. Now, you think the Cold War ended this? Not a chance. Fort Detrick's shadow remains. It shifted from biowarfare to biodefense, but many believe the line is paper thin. Where do you think COVID conspiracies came from? Right or wrong, they all point back to the legacy of Detrick. Once you unleash that kind of knowledge, that kind of power, you don't walk it back. You evolve it. Fort Detrick was the lab. MK-Naomi was the operation. The CIA was the hand behind the curtain. And the people, we were the test subjects, sometimes knowingly, sometimes not. Chapter by chapter, we're peeling it back. The science of silence, the tech of death. You're starting to see the bigger picture now. Stay sharp, we've got more to expose. Imagine waking up strapped to a gurney? Lights in your eyes, voices echoing, and no idea how you got there. That was the reality for hundreds, maybe thousands of people caught in the grip of MK-Ultra. The CIA didn't just want to control the world, they wanted to control your mind. MK-Ultra wasn't about unlocking secrets. It was about bending will, breaking it, rebuilding it in the image of power. They laced prisoners, patients, and even everyday civilians with LSD massive doses, 10 tabs, 20, enough to shatter the mind and rearrange it from scratch. Some never came back, others became walking ghosts. They did it in universities, hospitals, prisons institutions were supposed to trust. And here's the twist, they paid respected doctors and professors to do it. These weren't back alley madmen. These were elite minds funded by black budgets. The mission: create a Manchurian candidate, a human robot. Someone who could be programmed to kill, confess, forget, all on cue. They studied hypnosis, sleep deprivation, electroshock, sensory isolation, verbal abuse, anything that could reduce a person to a blank slate. Then they'd write a new program. One girl remembered being forced to watch violent films for hours while drugged. Another man woke up in a psych ward with zero memory of who he was. Decades later, he found out he'd been part of a CIA mind control study. No permission, no apology. MK-Ultra ran for over 20 years, through 149 sub-projects across 80 institutions. It didn't stop because they grew a conscience. It stopped because they got caught, barely. The rest was burned, destroyed by CIA Director Richard Helms before Congress could see the full truth. But a few documents survived, just enough to prove the nightmare was real. And here's the part that haunts. What if they didn't stop? What if MK-Ultra was just the first phase? What if all they did was go digital? The next mind war isn't coming. It's here. Through screens, algorithms, echo chambers. Welcome to MK-Ultra 2.0, where the lab is your phone, and the needle is your feed. Stay with me. The rabbit hole's only getting deeper. This wasn't sci-fi. This was science fact funded by your tax dollars. MK-Naomi wasn't about bending your mind. It was about stopping your heart, silently, invisibly, permanently. It was the CIA's black box of death, a top-secret collaboration with the U.S. Army at Fort Detrick, Maryland, where scientists didn't wear lab coats to save lives, they wore them to study how to end them creatively. We're talking poison handkerchiefs, cyanide pellets hidden in cigarettes, darts tipped with shellfish toxin so lethal it could paralyze you before you hit the floor. Imagine a briefcase that shoots a silent dart of death, or a pen that delivers fatal venom with a click. It wasn't a Bond movie, it was our government. In 1967, a memo later declassified in 2012 laid it all bare. MK-Naomi's mission was to build and maintain a stockpile of incapacitating and lethal materials, create disguised delivery devices, and test them for reliability under real-world conditions. This wasn't about war. This was about assassination, about control. Covert tools ready at a moment's notice for clandestine operations, tools that left no trace. The CIA called it predictability of results. We'd call it murder by science. One agent spoke of a toxin so potent it could be injected with a needle so fine, the victim wouldn't even feel the prick. Another operation tested aerosols that could knock out entire rooms of people in seconds. It was biowarfare, bypassing treaties, dodging oversight, and playing God in silence. The creepiest part, much of it worked. It was used. Just not on battlefields, on targets, on names written down in Langley offices. If MK-Ultra wanted to program minds, MK-Naomi wanted to end them. And both programs were run by people who answered to no one, not the courts, not the Constitution, not even Congress. They called it plausible deniability. We call it a shadow government with a kill switch. And if you think they stopped in the 70s, ask yourself, where did those poisons go? Where did the knowledge go? Who's got the dart gun now? MK Search wasn't a brand new monster. It was MK Ultra's final, more focused form, like a snake shedding its skin only to come back sharper, leaner, and deadlier. By 1965, the CIA needed results, not chaos, so they streamlined their black-budget Frankenstein under one chilling objective: total behavioral control. No more sloppy experiments. MK Search was precision warfare on the human soul. The program was split into two branches, one called Subproject OFTE, Unthink Drugs, Hypnosis, Sensory Deprivation, and Chemical Cocktails engineered to spark hallucinations, suggestibility, or full-on mental collapse. The other, Subproject Chikwit, a global pharmaceutical treasure hunt to track down exotic substances from foreign labs and underground markets. If it altered the mind, they wanted it, and they didn't care who it came from. MK Search agents scoured the world for any drug that could shatter a man's perception and reassemble it at will. It wasn't about healing, it was about hacking, about making people forget what they knew, or believe what never happened, or obey without question. They tested these tools on soldiers, prisoners, mental patients, and even regular citizens, most of them without consent. That's not a conspiracy theory, that's historical record. One trial involved slipping LSD into coffee served at a federal retreat, causing one scientist to leap from a window in terror. Others were buried deeper. Files vanished, identities erased. MK Search became a shadow beneath a shadow, a ghost of MK Ultra that adapted to the times, outliving scandal and surviving scrutiny. Officially, it ended in 1972, but where did those files go? Who inherited those tools? Because you better believe the techniques of MK Search didn't vanish, they evolved. Today, mind control doesn't come with syringes, it comes with screens, with metadata, with algorithms that know your triggers better than you do. But back in the day, MK Search laid the groundwork. It was the last chapter of old school mind war, and the first chapter of something even darker. In the deeper corridors of Cold War research, not all experiments were loud. Some were subtle, whisper quiet. This chapter explores the testing and deployment of chemical compounds that affected behavior, mood, memory, and decision-making, all under the MK Ultra umbrella. Government research teams and contracted private labs studied naturally occurring and synthetic substances not just for what they could do in high doses, but for what they could do in trace amounts. The goal wasn't always to knock someone out or drive them over the edge. Sometimes, it was about altering perception ever so slightly, making someone more compliant, more confused, or more suggestible. We now know that some substances were tested on populations without their consent, including soldiers, prisoners, and individuals in psychiatric care. Other trials took place in civilian spaces under less direct observation. These weren't tests as much as covert field experiments stepping beyond the lab and into real life. One of the lesser-known programs associated with these tests involved attempts to develop delivery systems that seemed benign, like aerosols, food, drinks, or topical contact. Some reports even mention enhanced interrogation studies where environmental stressors were paired with chemical influence. None of this was officially acknowledged at the time, and while some documents have been declassified, many details remain out of public reach. The thread that ties this together is subtle manipulation, chemical influence, paired with plausible deniability. This chapter isn't here to sensationalize, it's here to document what's already come out through testimony, hearings, and declassified materials. What we're left with is a picture of experimentation that blurred the line between defense and offense, science and control. It's the quiet chapters in history that often carry the heaviest consequences. MK Ultra's use of chemicals wasn't always loud, but it was effective, and it set a dangerous precedent. Most people think the CIA draws the line at drugs and weapons, but MK often proves otherwise. This was the project where the line between science and sorcery got erased. MK often was real. It spun off from MK Search and went fully rogue. The mission: explore the unknown psychics, demonology, astrology, telepathy, rituals. They brought in occultists, astrologers, clairvoyants, even practicing witches. They wanted to see if dark spiritual forces could be studied or used. Could a psychic predict an assassination? Could an out-of-body agent spy across enemy lines? Could curses be weaponized? The CIA wanted answers. MK often partnered with the U.S. Army's chemical corps and began experimenting on both people and animals using drugs mixed with ritual. Word is, they tested everything from hexes to mind possession. And they weren't just testing, they were observing, creating databases on supernatural behavior. Some reports say they investigated demonology seriously. Others claim they funded field agents to attend cult rituals around the world. Not to infiltrate, but to study, or to use. There's talk of a classified manuscript never released cataloging alleged spiritual entities that could influence the mind. Black sites weren't just bunkers. They were temples, labs turned into ritual chambers. It's said that, when the program got too wild even for the CIA, they shut it down. But insiders whisper it never shut down, it just evolved, went digital, cloaked behind the guise of pop culture and entertainment. Think about all the sudden mainstream obsession with witches, demons, astrology. They made it chic. And maybe that wasn't an accident. Maybe it's still MK, often hiding in plain sight. While most MK projects were rooted in the labs of Langley or the offices of Fort Detrick, Project MK-Chikwit took a different route, one that snaked through the jungles of Latin America, following whispers of ancient plants and ceremonial brews. This wasn't a trip in the metaphorical sense. It was a calculated mission. The CIA, under the MK-Ultra umbrella, quietly launched MK-Chikwit in the 1960s to study and collect samples of naturally occurring compounds believed to influence perception, emotion, and cognition. They weren't just curious about the plants themselves, but about what these plants could do to a mind in the right, or wrong, hands. Under MK-Chikwit, operatives and researchers ventured deep into territories where traditional shamans and local guides had long used sacred botanical brews during spiritual rites. The mission was to understand and ultimately control these age-old practices. In some cases, indigenous knowledge was copied and stripped of its cultural roots, boiled down to chemical analysis, and then funneled back into classified labs for further study. These plant-based compounds had been used for centuries to guide inner reflection, unlock altered states, or confront the subconscious. But through the lens of the CIA, they became tools for psychological influence, interrogation enhancement, and cognitive disruption. The same natural materials that tribal elders considered healing or sacred were now being used as soft weapons, not in the form of bullets or bombs, but through invisible shifts in perception. According to declassified info, MK-Chikwit overlapped heavily with MK-Search, particularly Project 116, where researchers began blending laboratory studies with cultural reconnaissance. They mapped out which plants affected mood, memory, fear, or suggestibility, looking for that perfect recipe, a botanical blend that could open the mind wide enough for programming. There's no question that much of this collection was done without consent. Local communities were rarely informed, and often misled, about what exactly was being harvested or why. What some people saw as spiritual medicine, the agency saw as data points. In essence, MK-Chikwit was a quiet heist of culture, of consciousness, and of the raw materials that shaped both. And even today, whispers about Chikwit linger, not because of what was found, but because of what was taken. Some researchers believe that the government's early knowledge of mind-altering plants may have shaped broader discussions around consciousness research, psychological warfare, and even the future of predictive behavior modification. What's clear is this: MK-Chikwit wasn't a footnote. It was a strategic piece of the puzzle, a jungle detour in the wider roadmap of mind control. MK-Search wasn't the beginning, it was the culmination. The CIA had spent 2 decades experimenting with mind control, biological weapons, hypnosis, truth serums, psychic driving, remote influence, and psychoactive drugs. MK-Search said, "Let's merge it all into one." Launched in 1965, MK-Search was built to continue and consolidate the work of MK-Ultra. But this time, it was quieter, more compartmentalized. Instead of dozens of disconnected projects, they built a network cross-agency collaborations, medical research front groups, pharmaceutical companies, and university labs. The people working on it, most didn't even know what they were a part of. Under MK-Search, the CIA focused on operational use, not just theory. Not just lab rats. They wanted results that could be deployed in the field. Memory erasure, rapid hypnosis, remote behavioral control, weaponized LSD, portable mind breakers, and everything was designed to be deniable. To keep the projects defined MK project often, they wanted to tap into the occult, the paranormal, and black magic. Real agencies exploring real spellbooks, psychics, and demons. Project Chikwit harvesting natural hallucinogens from remote jungles, breaking down tribal secrets, and weaponizing them. MK was where the science fiction became operational doctrine. They weren't just looking to control people, they were creating protocols for personality disintegration, deep brain rewiring, and consciousness reprogramming. The dark genius of MK, it never made the headlines. While everyone focused on MK-Ultra, this was happening in the shadows. Even today, you won't hear much about it. No big lawsuits, no public trials, just silence. And here's the wild part. Some believe MK never ended. It just went dark, got absorbed into private labs, tech firms, and next-gen defense programs. Where psychological warfare meets biotech and artificial intelligence, you think it's over. Or do you think they just changed the name? Or MK was the brainchild of a government that believed your mind was a battlefield, and they were ready to take it by any means necessary. MK-Naomi was never about ideas, it was about implementation. Where MK-Ultra tried to unlock the mind, MK-Naomi was designed to shut it down discreetly, efficiently, and without a trace. Launched as a joint effort between the CIA and the U.S. Army Special Operations Division, MK-Naomi was the branch of the MK tree that dealt not with manipulation, but with elimination. While most projects played in the shadows of psychology, MK-Naomi operated in the realm of engineered outcomes. It wasn't just black ops, it was black biology. The premise was simple: create and conceal methods of untraceable neutralization. That meant tools that could be slipped into a pocket, worn like jewelry, or left behind without suspicion. Forget fingerprints and shell casings, this was invisible warfare. Some of the most haunting details came from declassified documents in the late 1960s and early 70s. According to a 1967 CIA directive, MK-Naomi's mission was to maintain and stockpile substances capable of producing predictable behavioral or physiological effects. These weren't substances you'd find on a shelf. They were fine-tuned in labs, designed to degrade fast, disappear from autopsies, or mimic natural causes. One case that brought MK-Naomi closer to public view involved the suspicious passing of a foreign diplomat. No signs of struggle, no visible wound, but an inexplicable collapse mid-speech. While no official link to MK-Naomi was proven, rumors swirled that something needle-sized and air-propelled might have been involved. Even congressional reports admitted that among MK-Naomi's focuses were biologically based delivery systems, items for immediate incapacitation, materials designed to affect animals and humans. One internal memo detailed a device disguised as a handkerchief, capable of carrying a specialized compound that would absorb through skin contact. Another featured a small metallic pellet designed to deliver its payload before melting internally, leaving nothing but questions behind. MK-Naomi also maintained a kind of wet library of prototype devices and ready-to-deploy tech, some real, some experimental. These weren't stored at Langley or Fort Detrick alone, but at undisclosed locations accessible only to upper-tier handlers. The operational term used wasn't inventory, it was capability. And then came the cleanup. When the 1970s rolled around and Congress finally started pulling the curtain back, a flurry of shredding, burying, and stonewalling began. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of MK files, Naomi included. What we know today comes from fragments, overlooked memos, whistleblowers, or files mislabeled just enough to survive the purge. If MK-Ultra was the mind, and MK was the method, then MK-Naomi was the trigger. It asked the question few others dared to: what if control fails and we still need an option? Within MK-Naomi, they made sure they always had one. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. The government was supposed to protect us, the people who built this country, who worked the jobs, raised the families, keep the streets alive. But somewhere along the way, that promise broke. The very institutions created to serve the people have become the ones who violate, control, and silence us. The CIA, the FBI, the ATF, the military, the judges, the cops on the street, they are not just failing us, they are turning against us. The programs we've uncovered, the MKs, are proof, not just of secret experiments gone wrong, but of deliberate betrayals on a massive scale. Imagine that, your government stockpiling poisons, breaking minds, weaponizing trauma, all in the name of national security. And who pays the price? The innocent, the vulnerable, the everyday person who just wants to live in peace. This kind of secrecy breeds something deadly, distrust. And that distrust is real, justified, and grown. When your government can hide entire programs like MK-Naomi or MK-Ultra from public knowledge, how can you believe in their promises? How can you respect the people who do this behind closed doors? The irony is cruel. The people, regular folks, and some extraordinary ones hiding in plain sight, are the lifeblood of this nation. They keep it moving forward while many of the so-called protectors act like tyrants. Power-tripping officers who'd rather harm than admit a mistake. Politicians who cover up crimes while preaching justice. Judges who bend laws to suit agendas. And the shadow agencies who operate without oversight, accountability, or conscience. Why do they do it? Fear, control, the hunger for power, the belief that they know best, even if it means destroying the very people they swore to serve. But here's what's real. A country can't survive like this. A society can't thrive when its citizens are afraid of their protectors. This is the fuel for rebellion, for resistance, for awakening. The CIA and its clandestine operations, past, present, and likely future, are a purest form of this betrayal. This is why we watch. This is why we question. This is why we refuse to forget. Because the people deserve better. They deserve truth. They deserve respect. They deserve a government that serves them, not one that sees them as experiments, threats, or collateral damage. This chapter, in just history, it's a warning, a call to wake up, because if we don't hold those in power accountable, history will repeat itself and the betrayals will get darker, deeper, more dangerous. The choice is ours: trust or truth, silence or voice, compliance or revolution.